There's something I want to talk about today that might sound almost too simple. And I want to be very clear up front. I'm not sharing this as a look how powerful I am story or a manifestation flex. I'm sharing it because it was deeply confusing for me for a long time. Welcome back to the Wealth Identity Podcast. I'm Agnes. So, yes, there were many moments where things, declarations, visualizations, affirmations worked instantly, effortlessly, almost suspiciously easily. And there were many other moments where they didn't. And understanding why was the real breakthrough. So I spent a lot of time going back to all those different moments and kind of take them to pieces and really analyze what did I do in those situations and what I didn't do or did too much of in the situations where they didn't work. So let me start with one of those moments where it did work. Some years ago, I was still working as a teacher at a language school, and there was a situation at work. I'm not going to go into all the details, but it was one of those scenarios where I did everything I could to change it, but nothing worked. I mean, everything in my 3D reality. And after exhausting myself and running into dead ends again and again, and kind of losing hope, I remembered one day that, hey, let me just sit down for a few minutes and actually see in my imagination or play out in my imagination what I would love to experience instead of what I am now experiencing. So I did that, sat down, spent a couple of minutes playing out the experience I wanted. I felt some relief at the end, and that was really it. I didn't visualize it again. I didn't check if it was working. I didn't go back and fix my thoughts. I didn't even feel particularly excited. And in less than 2 weeks or so, against all odds, against all the setbacks and rejections I got from my boss previously, the situation unfolded exactly the way I visualized it. Down to the tone, the timing, the resolution. And what struck me wasn't that it worked. It was how little I cared after I watched it in my imagination and I chose my preferred version. That was new. Now, let me share the second example because this one really highlights the same principle in a different way. I was living in a huge apartment at that time and I was looking for a flatmate to share it with. So instead of doing anything, I literally said out loud something like, okay, I don't have time for this. I have a life to live. And then I spoke very clearly, almost like placing an order. I said exactly the kind of flatmate I wanted. The personality, lifestyle, the dynamic, the ease, the exact money I wanted. And I ended with, thanks. That was it. No follow up, no repeating it every day, no imagining them walking through the door or, whatever. Less than 2 weeks it took, and that person showed up. And when I say matched, I mean matched. Not 80%, not, well, close enough, but uncannily aligned with what I had said. Even with the part, she always pays up front, but she's never here. And here's the part I really want you to hear. This was not the first time I had ever declared something. I had done similar things many times before. And sometimes nothing happened. That's the part people leave out. Because if it were as simple as just say it once, my life would have looked very different much earlier. So, what was different here? It wasn't the words, it wasn't the confidence, it wasn't the clarity. It was the absence of need. In both these situations, I wasn't trying to get something to fix me. I wasn't trying to feel safer, more worthy, more validated. I had already checked out emotionally, not in a defeated way, but in a grounded one. Just casual, kind of, yeah, whatever, careless. I wasn't saying, please change so I can finally relax. I was saying, this is no longer defines me. And that distinction is everything. Because here's what I see now, looking back. Most of the times, manifestation didn't work for me. I was doing it to regulate myself. I was affirming to calm anxiety, visualizing to feel hopeful, declaring to override fear, repeating things because I didn't trust yet. So even though the words sounded empowered, the position was still, I need something to change before I can be okay. And the mirror responds to position, not language, not the desire, not the words. In the moments where things worked instantly, I wasn't trying to get. I was already done. Done negotiating, done explaining, proving, fixing. It wasn't effortlessness because I was spiritually advanced. It was effortlessness because I had to let go of the emotional contract. And this is the part that can feel confronting because it means manifestation isn't about how well you do the technique. It's about whether you are using the technique to avoid being with yourself. When I look back at the situations that didn't work, I can see it clearly now. I was still attached, still watching, still checking, still subtly asking, is it coming? Did I do it right? And that question alone tells the mirror everything it needs to know. Because someone who is doesn't ask that. Someone who has received doesn't ask, doesn't check, doesn't prove, doesn't do anything. It's just living. So if you've ever had that experience where something worked once beautifully and then you tried to replicate it and it didn't, you're not doing anything wrong. You're just trying to recreate an outcome from a different position. The ease wasn't in the method. It was in the release of negotiation with reality. And that's why you can't fake it. You can't force detachment. You can't manufacture being done. It happens when an identity drops, not when a desire intensifies. So if you're listening to this and thinking, okay, so how do I get to that place? The answer might not be what you expect. You don't get there by trying harder to trust. You get there by noticing where you're still using desire as a solution to discomfort. That's it. This isn't about never affirming again. It's not about never visualizing. It's about honesty. Am I doing this because it feels natural and calm? Or because I'm trying to make something happen so I can finally rest? Because the moment rest comes first. Reality follows without negotiation. And that's what I want this podcast to keep pointing you toward. Not better techniques, not faster results, but the quiet recognition that you don't need to convince reality of anything. You weren't missing a step. You were just still asking instead of standing. So if this episode landed for you, please like and subscribe. It helps the algorithm to push this message and make it reach the people who are ready to hear it. And I would love to know in the comments, have you had a moment where something worked effortlessly and you couldn't explain why? And now maybe looking back at that, you're like, yeah, I just said it and didn't check and it just appeared. Right. So we will go and keep unpacking this together. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next episode of the Wealth Identity Podcast.